So today we're going to take a look at the BrNO ZK383. This is a 9mm submachine gun that was designed in 1938 in Czechoslovakia. This came out of the same group that came up with the very first, or the first effective squad automatic rifle, the ZB-26, the ZB-39 for the Bulgarians, and for the British and Canadian troops, it was known as the BrN, which was a wildly popular squad automatic in 303. So based on their success with the ZB-26 as a squad automatic, they decided to scale down slightly, create a 9mm submachine gun, very much like the MP38, which uses a magazine that inserts from the side, holds roughly 30 rounds. And the reason these guns fed from the side like this is they were coming out of World War I and the trench warfare, so the thought process was you needed to be low profile. If you had a magazine sticking down, you didn't have the ability to get really close to the ground or the top of a trench and shoot, so the magazine needed to insert from the side. Also a lot easier in any prone position to do mag swaps and just stay as low as possible. One thing they did on this gun that was kind of revolutionary in my thoughts is they included a bipod, which is removable. It only added a slight amount of weight to the total package. It pretty much disappears into the underside of the forearm and allows you to effectively shoot this thing prone or from a rest, increasing its range. Another good feature that I really like, and it's kind of maligned, but it's a good feature, is a ladder sight that extended the range to 800 meters. There's still enough energy at that range to be effective. You don't have to use it. You can leave it set in the lowest position, which is 100 meters, so pretty much anything between 0 and 125 is going to be within a 3-inch window. They caught a lot of people tend to make fun of this. Oh, the 9mm cartridge isn't that effective, doesn't go that far. Well, it is, and it does. So, and you know, if you don't like it, you simply leave it in the 100-meter position, and it's a great rifle. It has a hooded front sight, and the hood actually attaches to the barrel shroud cap, which captures the barrel. We'll look at that in a second. One of the features of this gun was the variable rate of fire. They actually just used a weight in the bolt to increase the mass of the bolt to slow the rate of fire. I believe with the bolt in, it's reported to be 495 to 500 rounds per minute. With the weight out, it's supposed to be around 700 rounds per minute. So originally these guns were a dull gray zinc oxide finish, which you can still see on the bipod. I've had this about 15 years. It's been one of my favorite subguns. It's just dead nuts reliable. It will feed anything you put in that magazine that's 9mm. So like most things Czech, this thing is machined from large forgings and billet steel. Very robust gun. You could probably, other than the stock being damaged, throw this thing off the side of a mountain with no real issues. So you can see there's the 800-meter setting. Quite a bit of elevation change. So you can see this gun ejects through the right-hand side. You can see the bolt and extractor there. And there it is in the retracted position. You can see the ejector on the far side, which we'll look at a little more closely when we take this apart. The nice thing about the bipod is it adds quite a bit of utility to the gun, allowing you to actually utilize the ladder sight for shooting at range. Makes for a very stable platform. So the nice thing is the bipod pretty much just disappears into the forearm. And the nice thing about it is if you don't want it, you can simply press this capture pin out and take the bipod off, reducing the weight of the gun by about 10 ounces or so. I really like it because it makes the gun quite effective to 300, 400, 500 meters with no problem. So the safety is right here, and it simply blocks the trigger from moving. Very positive, large knurled button on both sides. Here's the selector, marked 1 for semi-auto and 30 for full auto, which represents the capacity of the magazine. One pull of if you hold the trigger, it will simply empty the magazine. So disassembly is relatively straightforward. There is a tube in the buttstock that contains a guide rod, a plunger, and the return spring, which pushes the bolt forward. So first things you want to do, make sure the magazine is out, the gun's unloaded, and close the bolt to relieve as much spring pressure as possible. Now, if you'll notice, there is a leaf spring with a slightly checkered surface here that allows you to hinge the butt plate down. You'll see there is a catch there that engages a notch in the butt plate. You hinge the butt plate down, and if you look closely, you'll see there is a lever here, which is pinned to the guide rod for the return spring. Now, this spring's under quite a bit of pressure. It's captured in a 1 foot space, and it's about 18 inches long. So we want to hold that down and rotate. And you'll notice there are pins on this guide rod that engage slots in the tube. Would be known as a bayonet system. There's the spring. At some point, somebody's kinked it a little bit, but still seems to work fine. And the plunger, which bears against the back of the bolt and holds the front of the spring. So when assembled, this is what we have for the return spring in the gun, compressed to about 1 foot. So disassembly of this thing is a little different than a lot of guns, but I think it's awesome. Somebody actually put quite a bit of thought into this. It's a great system. So first thing you do, make sure the bolt is forward on an empty chamber, of course, because this is a fixed firing pin gun, so it'll discharge when that bolt's home. It wasn't necessary to pull those parts out to disassemble the gun, but I wanted to show them to you anyway. To open the gun up for basic field cleaning, you rotate the selector lever to the vertical position. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little notch there that allows the lever to come out. Well, this is actually the takedown pin also. So we place that in the vertical orientation, and on this side you'll notice it protrudes a 1/4 inch or so. So we simply push that. It will stick out of the gun. So when that pin's pulled all the way through, you simply grab the buttstock assembly and lower, pull it to the rear about 1/4 inch. You can see it overlaps this upper receiver, and you can hinge it down out of the way. This then allows you to simply slide the bolt out of the rear, and there you are. And here's the weight that you remove to change the cyclic rate of this gun. Supposed to be about 500 with the weight in, 700 with the weight out. It's quite a substantial chunk of steel. Simply comes out of the bolt, and there you go. Okay, so at this point we can pull the barrel out, and field stripping is pretty much done. So we have this spring-loaded plunger here, which is nicely cut and checkered to grab. We simply pull it to the rear, and then the barrel rotates counterclockwise 90 degrees, and there we go, a little tight, and slides right out of the front. So you can see it has these nice large keys on either side, a very generous feed ramp, and that's it. The gun's field stripped. The bipod comes off if you want. Really no need to do that. This allows you a straight shot all the way through the receiver for cleaning. You can run your brush down in there, scrub that out. There's a good shot of the ejector. which is actually captured by the magazine release. So there's the recess in the front sight base that plunger we looked at snaps into, holding this thing in place. And you can see it's barrel serial numbered to the gun. So for reassembly, it's very straightforward. We turn this barrel 90 degrees. We slide it in the receiver. And you can feel it engage solidly at the back. Rotate so the front sight post is vertical, push the plunger forward, and the barrel is actually very snugly captured. Okay, so let's take a look at the bolt with it out. Here's the weight I was discussing earlier. Fairly heavy chunk of steel that changes the mass of the bolt and slows the cyclic rate from roughly 700 with it out to 500 with it in. So to remove the tail from the bolt that the spring bears against, you simply pull the charging handle and it slides to the rear. Nice heavy piece of steel with a decent banjo yoke on the end of it. So we've really got this bolt disassembled about as far as you do in the field. So one of the nice things about this bolt versus a lot of other fixed firing pin systems is you can actually replace the firing pin in this and the extractor relatively easily. And the field kit that came with the gun held a few magazines and a service kit, which was a spring, an extractor, a firing pin. I believe it had an additional charging handle in it. So to pop the extractor out, you simply take this yoke and press on the left-hand side of the bolt, and as you can see, that extractor simply slides out, all one piece of machined steel, nice heavy claw extractor. And the extractor actually retains the firing pin, so we'll give that a little bump, and out comes the firing pin. Since this is a wear item, it was a great idea that it be replaceable. Honestly, there are instances in other fixed firing pin guns of the firing pins wearing down and disabling the gun. Considering the level of Czech construction, I don't think you'd ever wear this firing pin out, but who knows? They were forward thinking enough to make it replaceable, so good on them. So to reassemble this, you simply drop the firing pin through the hole in the back of the bolt, all the way through to the front. Take the yoke, give it a little tap to make sure it's protruding through the bolt face. So to insert the extractor, you go over to the right-hand side of the bolt, the ejection port side, which is away from the recess for the charging handle and feed lips, and you drop this in. You'll notice that it's tapered so that when it goes in, it forces the firing pin forward, holding everything together. You drop the bolt weight in from the top of the bolt. See, it sits flush here. The yoke inserts from the rear and the charging handle drops through it, capturing it, making this one assembly. So let's put this back together. So here's the plunger I was talking about that fits in the front of the spring. And it's what actually bears against this tail on the bolt, pushing the bolt forward. Now this is articulated because the tube that the spring is in is not on the same plane as the bore of the receiver. So as it travels rearward, it needs to be able to drop. So maybe you can see this slot in the face of the lower receiver that the tail of the bolt goes into, and this plunger sits right below. So let's put this back together. Another thing to note, when the recoil spring assembly is out, the buttstock slides off of this tube. Now there's supposed to be a spanner nut here which captures the buttstock. I don't have that. Haven't been able to find one, so I've simply used a paper towel in the butt plate to kind of shove the buttstock forward, and it's worked well for me. Another thing you'll see with the buttstock off is a safety mechanism that was built into this gun that keeps the bolt from being retracted when the gun's on safe. With a fixed firing pin blowback gun, you run the risk, if you have a loaded magazine in the gun and the bolt closed, of the bolt cycling rearward when dropped on the butt, or you jump out of an airplane, a truck, whatever. The bolt cycles to the rear far enough to strip around, and you have a dangerous accidental discharge. So what they've actually done with this gun is they've cut some annular groove in this plunger that interfaces with this safety lever that's attached to the recoil spring tube. So when the safety is actually applied, you'll notice that moves up. So what you would do is you would, with the bolt closed, you would place the gun on safe. You can see that plunger move. A little leg goes up and engages this, which keeps the bolt from retracting when the safety's on. So we'll reassemble this by sliding the buttstock over the tube. Okay, so we're going to reassemble this by placing the plunger in the front of the spring. We're going to slide the spring in the buttstock and the spring guide into the spring, insert it into the tube, and rotate it roughly 60 degrees to lock it in place. Close the butt plate, and we're done. The spring assembly is back together. We've reassembled the bolt. The bolt simply slides into the gun. Align the charging handle with the slot in the receiver. Push it all the way forward and move this tail to the lower position. Close the gun and give it a vigorous pull rearward, and you'll notice the upper receiver slid into the lower. We push our selector lever through, and the gun's reassembled. So here I'll show you that safety I was talking about that minimizes the possibility of an accidental discharge. The safety is currently off, which allows the bolt to travel to the rear and be captured by the sear. So the bolt actually only needs to travel about halfway to strip and discharge around. So if the gun struck hard on the buttstock with a loaded magazine in it, the possibility exists of the bolt short stroking, you having an accidental discharge. But when that safety is on, the bolt is locked forward, can't be moved, allowing you to carry the gun with a loaded magazine with some relative feeling of safety. When you're ready to discharge, you simply take the safety off, retract the bolt, and it's ready to go. There you go. There's a brief overview and teardown on the BrNO ZK383 submachine gun. Hope you enjoyed it.
Bugs keep flying in my eyes. I don't know why.